Canary by Cloud9 and 3/4. Chapter 33. Those Who Remain. President Mike was forced to wait on the sidelines. His segment on the radio show was cancelled when the ambush on the League of Villains went south so quickly. Now, as the news reporters focused on All Might's fight, Yamada paced back and forth, fiddling with the cuffs on his jacket as he waited for the news to break. He'd heard nothing about Midoriya. He wasn't part of the action team for a reason. If he disappeared from the radio show to join the heroes out to rescue his star student before the world knew they were planning on acting so quickly after the press conference that even Aizawa got to take part in, it would have been more than suspicious. A guilt hung heavy in his heart because he wasn't there. Instead, he remained in his office on the very top floor of his hero agency, hoping, praying that things would be okay. He had been there when friends passed before, heroes that tried their very best. But that best just wasn't enough. But this was different. This was a different kind of loss. This was a terrifying, suffocating weight on his shoulders, one which he simply couldn't shift. It was something which stifled his every breath, which pulled at his heartstrings relentlessly. The worst bit was the waiting. He simply didn't know if Midoriya was safe, or if he was still fighting, if he had stopped. Now he was sitting behind his desk, drumming his fingers against the wood as he waited, and waited, and waited. All Might's fight came and went. The world's eyes were focused on the skeletal man, but not every pair were as fixated as perhaps they should have been. President Mike's, for example, tried to stare behind the withered hero and into the background of the live feed he had on his phone. But Yamada could not locate Midoriya. Perhaps this was a good thing. Maybe he'd gotten away before the fight truly began. Bakugo was nowhere to be seen either. It was likely that they were still together. Yamada was also aware that he would not be the first person the officials connected once the whereabouts of Midoriya were known. That honor would fall to his parents. Most probably, President Mike wouldn't even be told by the police what happened, and he would have to wait alongside the rest of the world to discover the truth. It was painful, having to wait like that. And for hours he did. But then his phone rang. Hello? President Mike almost yelled into the receiver in his panic. There was a heavy sniff from the other side. President Mike, sir? A woman's voice responded. Yamada hesitated. He pulled the phone away from his ear briefly, glancing down at the contact details for whoever this caller was. He was so used to talking to people over the radio that sometimes he forgot that he could tell who was calling him when using a phone without having to ask. It was Inko Midoriya. Miss Midoriya? Is everything all right? Can I help with something? Is this about Canary? Izuku? President Mike blurted out. It was probably too many questions at once, but they had fallen out of his mouth before his mind had the chance to catch up. There was another great sob from the other end. Have you heard anything? No? He replied. The hope he'd been hanging onto so desperately was beginning to slip from his grasp now. Have you? Do you need me to help you chase the police up on it? No, she stammered terribly. I'm at the station now, not far from the radio station, actually. Did you want me to come down? President Mike was already standing, ready to leave as soon as she said so. She hesitated for a moment, as if mulling the idea over in her mind. Okay. She finally concluded, and Yamada began to run towards the elevator immediately. I'll be there as soon as I can, he insisted, and after a few more reassurances and hesitant goodbyes, he hung up and charged out the front of the building. He had underestimated how far the police station was, but he ran the entire way regardless. He was completely out of breath by the time he threw the glass doors of the station open, hoping he had gone to the right place. I'm looking for Miss Midoriya, he said as calmly as he could muster to the receptionist, who blinked at him with startled eyes. She opened her mouth to reply, but there was no need because the short, slightly plump form of Miss Midoriya appeared from around the corner only moments later. "Hey there! Are you okay?" President Mike questioned immediately, skidding to her side and pulling her down into one of the cold plastic chairs up against the wall. He had sat down too, grasping one of her hands in an attempt to comfort her. She was still crying rather hysterically, her entire body shaking with the sobs. I can't get a hold of my husband," she started. "He's in America. He probably doesn't know what happened yet." The first question on Yamada's mind was, what did happen? But he bit the nagging thought back, focusing on the woman's welfare first and foremost. He pulled a small packet of tissues from his pocket and handed them to Miss Midoriya. There weren't that many left. "You can talk to me about whatever you need to," he insisted. "I'm a friend. And a hero too. It's my job." She barely managed a soft smile before she only started to cry harder. I just wanted to make sure you knew." He blinked at her, his heart racing. "About what?" She blew her nose, seemingly trying to compose herself before turning back to Yamada and looking him square in the eyes. "They couldn't rescue Izuku. The villains still have him. And they're gone." Yamada had been wrong. The worst bit wasn't the waiting, he acknowledged as the receptionist passed both the sobbing adults a pack of tissues each and a warm mug of tea with a soft, understanding smile. The worst bit was knowing the truth. 12 days since the kidnapping.
"I should be expelling every single one of you,"
Mr. Aizawa glared.
"apart from Hagakure and Bakugo. You either went to Camino or didn't try to stop those who did."
He took a deep breath and sighed, glancing over the group of students before him.
"Instead, I find myself increasing your number rather than decreasing it. You all know Shinso."
No one even turning to look at him when his name was uttered. Shinso didn't even bother looking up at his teacher. He had his feather pendant in between his thumb and forefinger, twirling it gently as Aizawa droned on. He mentioned something about regaining their trust, about going on to gain their provisional hero licenses. But Shinso wasn't listening. There was an empty space next to him.
"Isn't it exciting, Raven? We're actually on the hero course! And provisional licenses! We really made it!"
Those words were not uttered nor signed, for Midoriya was not moving into the dorms alongside Class 1A and Shinso, their newest member. He hadn't been seen since Camino, just over a week ago, when he had simply slacked in the villain's grip. He locked eyes with Shinso as he yelled his name, but Midoriya just shook his head, mouthing to him to leave him there, as he was pulled out of Shinso's grasp once again. No one was smiling as Mr. Aizawa led them into their dorms, a house titled Heights Alliance with a large 1A painted above the name. He pointed at the bathrooms, the kitchen, and other basic facilities, murmuring about new rules and regulations that they had the rest of the day to unpack and get familiar with the place.
"Oh, and Shinso?"
Shinso blinked at the mention of his name, finally paying attention to what Mr. Aizawa had to say.
"Coded too. Make sure you clean up after your pets. You have special permission to have them here. Don't let us revoke that."
Koda nodded frantically. Shinso didn't bother. He turned to the little green bird on his shoulder. "After I took her back from the vets, she flew off," Miss Midoriya explained as she handed Shinso a cup of tea. "She was gone for days. I thought she'd never come back." Shinso stared down at Siren, sat amongst that headband she'd stolen from the sports festival, now on the kitchen table. "But I had to take her back to the vets. She's been acting wrong. Wrong for Siren, at least," sighed Miss Midoriya miserably. "They said she was completely ordinary. A run-of-the-mill female canary. It's normal molting season, which explains all the feathers. But it's not right. She's not singing, you see.
Not singing?
Shinso frowned. That wasn't at all like Siren. Usually she wouldn't shut up. No. She doesn't eat that much either. Or fly around as often. I think she's sad. She didn't need to explain why. The answer was obvious. They sat in silence for a moment more. Shinso stared at his reflection in the murky color of the tea in his hands. Are you excited about the dorms? Miss Midoriya questioned, forcing a smile. Shinso cleared his throat. He might as well make an effort.
Yeah, it's bound to be an interesting experience, that's for sure.
She let out a half-hearted laugh. Of course, you and Izuku made quite close friends with a lot of Class A. It's good to know that you won't feel out of place. Shinso simply nodded, taking a sip of his tea.
It was cold.
But, I didn't invite you here just to talk, Miss Midoriya continued. You looked like Siren when we were at the police station this morning. Like the very soul had been sucked out of you. I couldn't bear to see you like that, and then I thought... Her breath hitched. It looked like she was trying to hold back tears. I don't know if my son will ever return. And well, please, will you take Siren?
Shinso blinked. It hadn't been what he was expecting. Take Siren?
Maybe she'll make you both happier.
She was smiling through her tears. She looked painfully like her son.
Take her to the dorms with you. If Izuku does come back to us, then maybe Siren will start singing again, and she can stay with him after that. But for now, I just want...
She trailed off for a moment.
Time waits for nobody, and we will move with it regardless of what happens. The best we could do is not drag our heels and find a way to keep going. Izuku wouldn't want us to be like this.
All right,
Mr. Aizawa sighed.
Get to it. The rest of your belongings are already in your rooms. Enjoy your day off.
Yes, sir, the class chorused in reply. Not a single one of them was smiling. Shinso was allocated to the very top floor, alongside Ida and Todoroki. There was one empty room between them. Shinso spoke to no one all day, pushing the cardboard boxes containing everything he could possibly want with him at UA out into the corridor. He shut the door and started to paint. The walls were soon a deep purple, darker than his hair. He downloaded a copy of Midoriya's Arsenal onto his phone. He listened to it on loop. It was therapeutic, painting and tapping his foot along to the songs, thinking about what powers Midoriya would derive from the rhythm. On an upside-down box in the middle of the room, Shinso had collected numerous items from Miss Midoriya. They belonged to Siren, apparently. So basically she couldn't take ownership of them, and were therefore probably stolen. Or her son bought them. Shinso liked to think Siren just stole most of the stuff. It was a funnier thought. She had the headband from the sports festival. Midoriya's medal, too. Then there was a collection of hero stickers. Quite a few were a present mic. The decapitated head of an All Might plushie was slightly worrying, but Shinso decided not to question it. Then she just had these random pieces of green fabric, from who knows where, a couple of shiny purple sweet wrappers, torn corners of Midoriya's homework, specifically the parts where a high mark was written in red pen. There was even a bit of scorched plastic that Shinso was pretty sure was from Midoriya's wrecked headphones that Bakugo blew up during the finals. The entire collection was bundled together in what used to be a little circular wooden box. It was so chewed and covered in feathers and birdseed that Shinso didn't think it really deserved that title anymore. So it was just deemed Siren's Nest and labeled as such with permanent marker, probably by Midoriya, on the other side of the semicircle-shaped part that Siren had wrecked to allow her easier access access. It was conveniently portable. Shinso could just pick the entire thing up with Siren inside and carry it around. Thinking about Siren's antics certainly proved to be a good distraction. Before long, the walls no longer sported a speck of white, except for whatever was under that one feather that got stuck to the wet paint, and Shinso just painted over and let dry. He'd painted the ceiling black as well, which had proved to be a struggle, but now everything had dried, he could remove the white rags, well, white, purple, and black rags, that he'd covered the wooden floor and various items of furniture with. Bundling them up, he chucked them into the corridor and started to drag his belongings back inside. Need some help? Shinso blinked, pulling out his earphones.
Jiro, what are you doing up here? Isn't this the boys' side?
Yeah, whatever. She shrugged, grabbing a random box and carrying it inside the room without a second thought. I got bored.
I thought you said you'd be busy all day.
Shinso continued, not protesting, as he started to shove various items in his drawers. I just said that so everyone else would leave me alone. Shinso hesitated. Jiro had started decorating long before he had. Shinso just stood on his veneer for a good few hours, staring into the distance and listening to a recording of Midoriya's last radio show. He'd seen her trying to drag numerous boxes and instruments in through the door and lug them up to her room on the other side of Heights Alliance. She must have been trying to keep herself busy. Shinso realized that was why she was here now. What are you listening to? She questioned after gingerly moving Siren's nest to sit by Shinso's laptop open on his desk.
The arsenal.
Shinso answered simply. He wasn't sure how much of this talking he could deal with at the moment, but Jiro obviously needed it. I don't have a copy of that.
Do you want one?
She didn't reply immediately. Yeah, she said as she dragged the last box inside.
I'll send it to you later.
Shinso nodded, now hanging up his curtains. Thanks. She just sat there, on his bed, and watched him for a while as he finished with the curtains, packed away the remainder of his clothes, haphazardly tossed his small collection of books onto his shelves, and shoved the now flat-packed cardboard under his bed. It was only when he hung his clock up on the wall that he realized that almost half an hour of silence had passed between them. He turned around only to see her holding the very last box he had to unpack. It was small, just an old shoebox. The lid was off, and she hugged it against herself, shaking uncontrollably as she hung her head. She was crying. Shinso wavered.
Don't get tears on my pictures,
he snapped.
You'll ruin them with your pitiful human emotions.
She laughed, but then started to cry even harder. I'm only human. There was clearly more behind that sentence than Shinso could understand, because now there were rivers streaming down her cheeks. She hadn't even bothered with makeup that day. Or else Shinso knew it would be everywhere. He took the box from her trembling hands. Shinso had set up a corkboard specifically for these pictures. Midoriya had a similar set from Aozora, but Shinso had printed off more during the week that had just passed. Moments from right across the year. From group photos to moments in the sports festival or in the radio station. Even memories from the summer camp before it all went south.
You want a tissue?
Shinso asked once he'd finally finished pinning up the photographs, pulling an unused bundle from his pocket and handing it to her. She nodded as she accepted them, trying to dry her eyes, but to no avail.
I'm not good at this feeling stuff,
Shinso admitted. He was all too used to holding a conversation with someone who wouldn't talk back,
even when I'm the one suffering from it. I'm just not. I've never really. Look, Midoriya was kind of like my first friend, and I wouldn't be here in the hero course if it weren't for him. He blackmailed the principal to get me in.
Jiro laughed again. He was on the right track then.
No, I'm not kidding. He literally blackmailed him.
Shinso laughed too.
And Nezu was impressed.
Of course he was.
Yep, trust Midoriya to pull something like that. Anyway, you know, before Camino, I said that Midoriya was fragile. Well, he is. But he's strong in other ways.
He snaps.
Shinso blinked at her. Weirdly enough, it made sense. Yeah, he just reaches this point, and the pressure becomes too much, and he suddenly just... it's hard to explain.
He tosses all of that shyness away and just does whatever he can to make it through.
Jiro finished. Her tears were starting to slow now. There was a good chance she'd just run out. Exactly. Shinso nodded. Maybe he's reached that point now.
A soft smile appeared on Jiro's face. You're being optimistic now. Huh.
Shinso just shrugged. I've been thinking about a lot. Uraraka made some sense, I suppose. When all hope is lost, force yourself to be optimistic, because then you only have to feel the pain once.
She just nodded again, and they sat in silence once more, staring blankly forwards. At Siren sitting still in her nest below the corkboard of memories. Shinso swallowed the lump in his throat. After a while, he stood up.
Come on, let's see what everyone else is doing,
he suggested. Yeah, okay. Sorry for barging in on you,
she moped, smoothing out the creases she left behind on the fresh sheets of his bed. Yeah, you should be.
And for stealing your tissues?
You're gonna have to pay me back for that. Shinso grinned, holding the door open for him.
Nah, I'm broke, she said, a slight smile returning.
Right. You owe me your soul.
Oh no, I've already sold it to the devil.
Well, looks like I've got a legal battle on my hands.
With the devil? She raised an eyebrow as she pressed the elevator button.
I will win.
Yeah, right.
You doubt my persuasive abilities?
Against the...
Shinso sighed at the now brainwashed Jiro as the elevator started to go down. See, you walked right into that one.
He released her and she punched him playfully on the shoulder. I guess I did. When the elevator opened and the two of them walked into the common room area, they found that a good majority of Class A was already there, chatting amongst themselves and munching on what seemed to be plates of curry. Oh, there the two of you are. Yaoyorozu smiled, carrying 2 plates of the stuff over to them. We were waiting for you to come down so we could start dinner, but it ended up getting a little late. I hope you don't mind. Nah, it's fine. Thanks.
Jiro sniffed, rubbing at her eyes once more before accepting the plate.
Yaoyorozu's smile melted into a rather pitiful one as she noticed her friend's sorrow. She handed the last plate to Shinso and then said, After you've finished, perhaps you'd like some calming herbal tea? I've always found lavender eases the mind. Thanks, Jiro replied. That would be nice. Yaoyorozu nodded, trying to smile a little wider again, and then wandered off to return to her own food, sitting by Uraraka. Shinso didn't really feel like interacting much with the others. He felt rather out of place here in the hero course without Midoriya. So after hovering in the middle of the room for a moment, he ended up locating a seat beside Todoroki, who had been alone as far away from everyone else as he could get. Jiro followed him, and Todoroki didn't protest when the two of them sat down beside him. They ate in silence. The curry was far better than the muck they'd conjured up back at the summer camp, but Shinso barely acknowledged the taste. The warmth was nice enough. Hey! Has everyone finished with their rooms now? Mina called out as Shinso finished his meal.
I still have some work to do, Todoroki admitted quietly.
Come to think of it, Shinso had heard an awful racket from Todoroki's room for most of the day. He'd had to turn up his music to drown it out. Just Todoroki, that? Mina supposed, glancing around, but no one else seemed to protest. Awesome! How about we go and have a peek at everyone's decorating skills later?
I'd rather not.
Shinso sighed. It felt like an invasion of privacy. Yeah, me neither. Jiro nodded. Oh, boo! Mina sighed. Come on, it'll be fun! I don't mind. Uraraka grinned. Yay! Mina exclaimed, leaping to her feet from the sofa she had been perched on. See? Uraraka's not moping around! They glared at her. How dare she? Her face fell moments later. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't...
Your depressing moods aren't helping anyone,
scoffed Bakugo. His hands were in his pockets as he strolled from where they had to wash up their dishes back towards the elevators.
It's not going to change anything.
Shinso pushed back his chair, stood up, and walked in Bakugo's path, arms crossed. "Get out of my way!" Bakugo hissed, baring his teeth like a feral animal. "Give me one reason right now why I shouldn't break your nose," Shinso growled. "Hey! What the heck, Shinso?" called out the electrically charged Canary from across the room. "I'm going to be your classmate for the next 2.5 years, so I'm going to make this very clear right from the start." Shinso began, not moving an inch. "I don't like you, or anything that you stand for."
Guys?
Uraraka tried to interject. "I never have, and I never will." Shinso scowled. Bakugo narrowed his red eyes, glaring daggers right back at him. "Hey, what brought this on?" called out Kirishima, putting his half-clean plate on the side as he cautiously made his way toward the two of them, ready to step in if need be. "How long did it take for you to get Deku to spill rubbish about me?" Bakugo questioned, shoving his hands in his pockets. "About a week," Shinso admitted. "Not long after he figured out he wasn't the quirkless loser you've been labeling him his entire life. Don't you dare call him by that name."
"I don't understand! Who's Deku?" frowned Mina.
"You're talking about Midoriya, right?" supposed Kirishima. "Guys, what happened really sucks, but we shouldn't be arguing over—" "You left him behind," Shinso snarled. Bakugo flinched. "He told me to! And you listened!" he exclaimed. "Now he's gone!"
"Please, let's not blame each other for this," begged Uraraka. "It's just making things worse."
Shinso balled his hands into fists. "No, you don't understand. None of you have any idea that all this is your fault! Don't take it out on me!" Bakugo yelled. "You weren't there when the villains tried to disintegrate his freaking face! But you were, and you did nothing to stop it." When Bakugo hesitated, Shinso knew he had been right. "Just like you did nothing to stop Midoriya from becoming mute in the first place!" Shinso shouted, pointing at him with a shaking finger in accusation. "The bastard's mental health problems were not on me!" Bakugo leered, stepping a little closer to Shinso. Shinso glared down at him. Yeah, he was taller and was very pleased by that fact. Kirishima by this point had decided enough was enough. He put a hand on Bakugo's shoulder, trying to convince him to back away. "Please, guys," he said. "It's the first night. Let's not get off on the wrong foot." "Yeah, too late for that," Shinso glared, folding his arms again. "I get that there was more between you and Midoriya than you've ever really mentioned, Bakugo," Kirishima continued, "but maybe now's not the time to explain." "No, come on. Why don't you tell us, Kachan?" Bakugo lunged forwards, only held back by Kirishima's firm grip. "Call me that again, and I swear!" "What, blow up in my face? Chuck me off a rooftop? Or should I save you the effort and go take a swan dive myself?" Shinso yelled back at him. Bakugo wavered. "Yeah, I know about everything. Not that he said much because he never did, but it was easy enough to figure it out," he barked. "That you grew up together, that you used him as your freaking punching bag just because he didn't have the power to fight back. I know that your entire middle school class joined in on that little game, that he fell silent in hopes that you would leave him alone. And then it got worse, and suddenly he couldn't speak at all." Shinso was vaguely aware of Kirishima backing away from Bakugo a little, of the rest of the class staring wide-eyed at the interaction, of Uraraka's eyes wide with a sudden realization of sorts, or of Jiro burying her face in her hands, clearly sobbing again as Yaoyorozu collapsed into the chair beside her to comfort her. "It's your fault. He never found his quirk," Shinso continued to thunder. "Your fault. He fell mute in the first place." He didn't bother holding back the tears that pricked at his eyes. His voice was hoarse and sore as he screamed, but he didn't care anymore. "That he thought he'd never amount to anything, and that he was the worthless, useless Deku that you made him out to be. You were the one who told him to go and commit suicide!" Silence engulfed them. No one said a word. They all stared at Bakugo as Shinso brought his past crashing down around him. Shinso let out a small laugh.
He said it would really pull the rug out from underneath your hero plans if he ever did it. Which was the main reason why he did it. Screw you!
Bakugo snarled, his body trembling with emotion. Shinso wasn't quite sure what emotion it was.
Nah, I'm enjoying screwing with you,
Shinso replied with equal venom.
I suppose the only reason I haven't punched your face in yet is because I haven't had the opportunity. And I haven't said any of this to the teachers because Midoriya thought you'd be an amazing hero, and he'd be mad if I did anything to mess that up whilst he was gone. So I would suggest watching your back.
He turned on his heel and began to march towards the stairs. He couldn't bear the thought of standing in the elevator and waiting for it to close.
Hey! Wait!
Shinso hesitated, turning again to look back at Deku.
Deku!
He faltered at the name.
During the sports festival. It was the first time he'd spoken to me in years. But he said that I'd spent my whole life being called a hero, whilst you were called a villain.
Shinso frowned. Where was he going with this?
And he told me that they'd got it the wrong way around.
He blinked. Midoriya really said that? Bakugo grasped the top of his black shirt, bundling it up in his fist.
And when I was with the villains, all I could think about was that...
Was he actually crying?
And then maybe it was right.
His voice cracked.
He was right! And what am I supposed to do? He's gone! And All Might's gone! He's retired, lost his power, and that's all on me, huh?
Shinso wasn't sure what to say. No one was.
Well, screw you! Bakugo yelled. Because there's nothing I can do about it! I can't change what happened, and you can't either! No one can!
Shinso wavered for a moment more before turning back to the stairs, hanging his head as he climbed, one hand on the banister and the other on the feather pendant by his chest. Although he hated to admit it, Bakugo had been right. There was nothing he could do at the moment. All this shouting and screaming served no purpose. It wasn't like he could suddenly not feel sad, and he didn't have to drag everyone else down with him. Shinso collapsed onto his bed, staring at his corkboard of photos again, and at Siren, asleep in her nest. She had been pulling out her feathers again. They were everywhere. He cast his mind back to the very first conversation he'd ever had aloud with Midoriya. He'd imprinted it in his brain.
You must be crazy to only want to speak to the person who can brainwash you if you do.
I can deal with crazy,
Midoriya had said in his quiet, raspy voice.
Good.
Shinso laughed.
Because it's only going to get worse from here, I promise you that.
I'll hold you to that promise.
Shinso was crying again now, but he just closed his eyes and smiled.
I promise,
he said into his pillow.
I promise. You better be out there somewhere, Midoriya, because we've only just begun.
He glanced at his alarm clock. It was nowhere near late enough to go to bed. But then he frowned, and after a moment's thought, he pulled his phone from his back pocket. He couldn't reach Midoriya, not at the summer camp nor at Camino. He couldn't reach out for him physically. But maybe, just maybe, Midoriya might still be able to hear him. Shinso tapped a contact on his phone and brought it to his ear.
Hello!
Hey, it's Shinso.
Excuse me!
Who?
Shinso sighed.
Raven.
Oh! Yeah, I knew that. I totally knew that.
Of course you did. Sorry, you're probably pretty busy at the moment.
No, it's alright. How are you holding up?
Yeah. Okay, I guess.
Good. How's the dorms?
It's been interesting, to say the least.
I'm going to take that as a positive. So, how can I help you, Raven?
Well, I guess you've got a bit of a blank space on Tuesdays and Thursdays now.
Yeah, you could say that.
So, remember you asked about meeting Owl back along?
Yeah.
What would you say to me dragging her along next Tuesday evening?
The woman on the other side of the phone fell quiet.
All Shinso could hear was the panicked rustling of paper for a good minute.
Ask your teachers and it's a done deal, she suddenly called out.
Shinso grinned. Thanks, Aozora.
You call me if you need someone to talk to, okay? That used to be my job, you know.
Okay, I'll bear it in mind.
Do you want to keep talking now?
Shinso hesitated. About what?
Anything! Anything at all.
He glanced back across his room. What do you know about Canary molting seasons?